Talk about figured bass, and to do that I'm going to look at some of the homework examples that are on page 90 in chapter 11, where it asks you to realize these figured basses, which we've really never done before. So I just want to tell you what a figured bass is. First of all, notice that what you're given is a bass line with no melody. This is different. We haven't really seen this before. We've always been given the melody, and we've had to come up with the other voices and maybe decide on the harmonization. But what we have here is a bass line with a set of numbers. The numbers look vaguely familiar, don't they? They look like inversion symbols, 6s and 6/4s, but there's some other symbols scattered through there that we need to talk about. So here's the good news. With figured bass, you do not need to decide what the harmonization is. The figured bass actually gives you all the information you need to know what these chords are. All you have to do is decode it and then come up with what the Roman numerals are. So that's what we're going to do here together in this example. These numbers, they're really giving you all the information that you need to create the chords and the non-chord tones. They refer, yes, they're inversion symbols, but they really do refer to certain pitches or combinations of pitches. Or maybe they're a shorthand for some of the pitches that we actually need. This was a notation that actually was used in the 17th and 18th century. This part would have been given to someone who was going to play the bass line, perhaps a bassoon or a cello would get this part, but also the keyboard instrument, maybe a harpsichord or an organ player, or maybe even like a strumming instrument, like a guitar or a lute player might actually be playing this part as well, and they would have to improvise their chords based on what they saw with the bass line and the figured bass symbols. So we're going to just take a moment and see if we can't decode this together. In order to make this work a little easier for us, we're going to do this one here, number 2, and it's in the key of C minor. So I'm going to make a chart for myself of the chords in the key of C minor, and I'm going to put this in the bass clef actually. So I'm going to make my scale harmonic minor scale, which is a good scale for figuring out chords, and write in my triads along the way like this. When I get to the 5 chord, I'll raise the leading tone, and of course the 7 chord has its root tone raised, and I will label these. The 2 is diminished, the 3 is major, the 4 is minor, the 5 is major, the 6 is major, and the 7 is diminished, the key of C minor. All right, so a few rules about figured bass. The first rule is sometimes you'll see nothing written, and that's actually a code. That's a code for the fact that that bass note is the root tone. Nothing written, then that's the root tone. So if C is the root tone, it must be a 1 chord. Do you see? That's the only note that has C as the root tone, is the 1 chord. I'm going to go ahead and not try to write the Roman numerals here. I'm going to do them on a separate line a little bit lower to keep it nice and clear. Key of C minor. All right, the next note I see is a D. The code is 6/4. And what that really means is that there will be the interval of a 6 above that, which would be a B flat, and a 4 above that would be G. Notice I said B flat. That's because I just count up and I look at the key signature and I see whatever it says. Unless there's something in the figured bass that tells you to alter the note. And in fact, there is in this example. There's a slash going through the 6. And that was a code that was used by Baroque composers to indicate you should raise the note a half step. Okay? So instead of writing a B flat, you'll be writing a B natural. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. 6/4, we already know what that means. That's a second inversion chord. That means that that must be the 5th of the chord. Which note has a D as the 5th? It must be the 5 chord. Okay. Here's another way of doing it. This is sort of a shorthand way of doing it. If this is telling me 6/4, that you know that means second inversion, and it's telling me that's the 5th of the chord, then watch. I'm going to write the fifth, the third, and the root. I just wrote them going down because I knew that was the fifth. And that line going through the sixth means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The B flat is going to be B natural. And look, I know that in a minor key, the B flat does have to be B natural. So the figured bass is actually reminding me to raise the leading tone. These numbers are not telling you where to put the notes. Yes, I need a B natural, but is it there? Should I put it here? Should I put it here? You have to do good voice leading from one chord to the next to get that right. The next chord has a 6. We already know that 6 is first inversion. So that means that must be the third of the chord, E flat. Which chord has E flat as the third? There it is right there. It's the 1 chord. Watch me do this. This is a little shorthand. If I know that this is a first inversion chord, and that's the third, then I know that the root must be here, and the fifth must be here. You see what I did? That's first inversion because it says 6. So that's the third. So that must be the root, and that must be the fifth. And there's my chord. It's a 1 chord. There are no numbers underneath, which means that this is a root position chord, and it's G. It must be a 5 chord. Now, what does that natural mean all by itself? This was a little code that the composers of the Baroque era used. If they put a little natural, or if they put anything, maybe a little flat or a little sharp, you never know what you're going to see there. But what it meant is you do that to the interval of the third. They didn't bother writing the 3, but they could have. They could have been saying, put a natural on the third. So if you just see an accidental by itself, you apply it to the third above the bass. And look, this makes perfect sense. It's the 5 chord, and the third above the bass would need a natural. The figured bass is actually reminding you to raise the leading tone. This is good. The chords, if you decode it, they're given to you. The accidentals that you need to make it work are given to you. Finally, we have an A flat with nothing written underneath, so that's the root of the chord. The only chord with an A flat is the 6 chord. Here we go. This is an F, but it's got a 6 underneath, which means it's first inversion. First inversion means that that's the third of the chord. Now, we can look through to see which chord has an F as the third, and look, there it is. There's the F as the third of the 2 chord. So this must be a 2 chord, diminished in first inversion. Let me show you that other little trick. I see the 6, I know it's first inversion, therefore I know the bass is the third. So I know the root must be here, that would be the root, and I know the fifth must be above that. And that, look, I just spelled the 2 chord. Okay. This is 6/4. 6/4 means that it's in second inversion. And if that's second inversion, that means that must be the fifth of the chord. So here's my little trick. That's the fifth, so that's the third, so that's the root. And you probably notice I just wrote a 1 chord. Another way I could have done it was to say, I know that's the fifth. Which chord has G as the fifth? And it's right there. It's the 1 chord. So this is a 1/6/4. Here's a G with a natural under it, which I already did over here. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It must be a 5 chord. And here's a C with nothing under it. Root position, because there's nothing under it. C must be a 1 chord. So that's the first thing you do with figured bass, is you got to figure out what your chords are. Use this, decode it, write all the chords. There's not going to be any choices there. They're going to be prescribed for you. So for the 5 chord here, G, B, D, make sure that you raise the B to B natural. Remember the figured bass with the slash through the 6 is telling you that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, wherever you put the B flat, you need to raise it to B natural. The 5 chord is in second inversion, so you want to double the bass. So we'll go ahead and do that in the soprano. Of course, with figured bass, you're called upon to write a nice soprano line, which sometimes can be a challenge. And let's see, we need a G, which we'll put in the alto. And then we need the B natural, which we can put here in the tenor. We're going to come back to the 1 chord, which is C, E flat, and G. It's in first inversion, so you're going to double the soprano. Of course, you don't have a soprano until you write one. I'm going to go ahead and choose a C. By the way, with figured basses, there can be different solutions. You know, someone might decide to move that melody a different place, but watch what would have been a mistake. If I had taken the D and brought it up to E flat, then that would have been the same as the bass, D up to E flat. You can't write the same thing in the soprano and in the bass, then you get parallel octaves. Here's the C. I'm going to double it because in a first inversion, major minor chord, I double the soprano. So here is a nice place for it. In the tenor, the missing note is G. Here's the 5 chord in root position. So I need a G, a B natural, and a D. I kind of like the idea of putting a B natural right there. I need to double the bass in a root position chord. So I'll put the G there, and I'll put the D right here. My next chord is A flat. Now, of course, I can always refer to the little chart that I made of my chords to get the spelling of these correctly. The A flat chord, or the 6th chord, is A flat, C, and E flat. So I'll write that here. Now, don't forget, this is pretty important. I'm going to put a little asterisk here. We had a whole chapter about this, where in a minor key, when you're going from a 5 to a 6 chord, you have to use an irregular doubling, or else you're going to have all kinds of voice leading problems. So this is hopefully just something that you memorized. 5, going to 6, in a minor key, irregular doubling, double the 3rd. So I'm going to just make a little message up there to myself so I don't forget that. Now the 3rd actually is C. There's a good place for the C. And I'm going to double the C. So I'll put it right here. And the note that's missing that I haven't written yet is E flat. The next chord that I've been called upon to write is a 2 diminished 6. Let's just go ahead and find my 2 chord. D, F, A flat. By the way, some people are good enough with their chords. They know their chords well enough. They don't have to write all the notes of the chords up here. Eventually, I hope that all of you will get good enough for that. But if you need to write your notes up here, don't be shy. Go ahead and write them because it's better to get this correct. D, F, A flat. It's a diminished triad. You'll be doubling the bass. I'm going to put my melody pitch here. There's the D. The F gets doubled. I think that would be a good place for the F. And the missing note is A flat. That's a 3rd, which is okay. And then I'm going to write a 1-6-4 chord, which is C, E flat, and G. I could either put a C here for the melody, that would be fine, or I could put an E flat. I think I'll put a E flat. And I need to double the bass, which is G. Now I've just noticed something here. I'm going to change my mind on this because if I go ahead and put the G here, I'll have parallel octaves, which I really don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and change that melody note to a C. This way I can double the bass right there. G, G, C, E flat. Okay. Then I'm going to go to the 5 chord, and the 5 chord is G, B, and D. So it looks like there's a good place for the B. I'm going to double the G again, which you always do in root position chords. and then I'll finish by writing a 1 chord. Okay, so there you go. We've figured out the figured bass, we decoded, and then we went and we did voice leading all the way across. We had to write our own melody, and that's how you do a figured bass.